Hi, my name is Kris Yee. Yee is my married name. I live here in San Francisco, and I was born in 1965. I was born in Vallejo. I grew up very little part of my childhood in Fairfield, but most of my childhood I grew up in Vacaville until I made my way into San Francisco, and I have some other in between theirs. But that's kind of historically the timeline. Okay?
Can you describe your hometown?
Well, I don't know if you've ever driven through Vacaville. It's on the way to Sacramento or when you go up to Lake Tahoe. So when I grew up in Vacaville, it was about a community of about 30,000 people. So it was a very, very small town. One high school. And I grew up in what was the rural part of Vacaville. We had a few acres. We had dogs, cats. I had horses from when I was 6 years old. So that was the big things. I had horses, and that was really my mode of transportation growing up in the rural part of Vacaville. Was how I got to friends' house, how I spent my time was with my horse or riding my horse. So that's kind of how it was growing up in little old Vacaville. Now I think it's hundreds of thousands of people, multiple high schools, but very small when I grew up there.
Can you describe your childhood? Like, did you enjoy it? Were there any, like, big memories, or, like, good times?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. One of the reasons that my parents moved from Fairfield to Vacaville was the main reason was me and my brother. They wanted us to have the opportunity to have a home with a lot of property, to be able to go outside, to play outside, to have animals and have that kind of experience growing up, which we couldn't necessarily get in a development living near Travis Air Force Base, which is where my dad worked. So the big thing was they bought that house so we could have that kind of experience, and yeah, it was great. I mean, a lot of people don't say I grew up and I had horses, and that was, my main thing when I was growing up, and that's what all my friends had, and we all rode horses. That's the main thing I remember of growing out there as a young child. From about when I was 7 years old, I rode the horse, and I rode it everywhere. It was a different time then. I rode it everywhere. So that was probably the main thing, and that was probably the best thing about growing up out there.
Do you still ride horses now?
I don't. I took my daughter once over by Half Moon Bay, I think, for a birthday or something to ride a horse, but that's the last time. But once I left Vacaville for San Francisco, that was gone. Huh?
Do you miss riding horses, like, as a mode of transportation?
No, not really. I mean, the mode of transportation, don't get me wrong, when I was in high school, I had a car. I mean, I had to have a car. That was how you could get around. It wasn't like the 1800s. But when I was in high school, taking college courses, the community college was in Sassoon. So the only way to get there was by car because it was a 30-minute drive. So I had a car when I was 15, 16 years old. But I still rode my horses because that's what we did.
Were there any, like, historical events that happened during your childhood that you remember?
So many. Probably the earliest thing I can remember, and this was probably 6 or 7 years old, and I have very little recollection, but the Vietnam War, and that was, a lot of it had to do with my father worked at Travis, and he was in charge of the shop, the autopilot shop was called, which were the planes that did the cargo to Vietnam, and that was his job. So there was, and also his brothers, my uncles, were stationed in Vietnam. The main thing I remember is my mother had what they used to call a POW bracelet. And you would wear this bracelet. This was someone who was either captured or missing while they were over in Vietnam. And you weren't supposed to take the bracelet off until they came home. And I can still to this day, even though I was probably 6 or 7 years old, I can remember the day she took it off. And it's kind of sad. It wasn't because he came home. It was because we knew there was no chance he was ever going to come home. So at some point, you just have to take the bracelet off. And I don't know if she still has that bracelet, but I still remember that. That still sticks with me. And that's really my main memory about Vietnam. But at that age, it doesn't have that much meaning. But that was probably the earliest memory of that. As far as things that occurred during the 70s after Vietnam and after the civil rights movement, I mean, in my mind, it was a quiet time. I know that there was a lot of problems because there was huge, like we talk about inflation now, it was nothing like what happened in the 70s, and the turmoil that was going on around that. But I don't really remember a lot of significant events until probably the 80s when I was in high school. Middle school, elementary school, your focus is elsewhere. It's not really on the news, and news was not 24/7 like it is today. You either saw the evening news, and there was like 3 TV stations, and I'm talking about, that was the Bay Area too. 3 TV stations. You got your news at night, maybe in the morning, or the newspaper. So there was not this 24/7 of everything going on. So I don't remember a lot going on during the 70s. Just seemed like a fun time. More so of things that would start to occur in the 80s. And I can talk more about that if you want.
Do you remember like the Zodiac Killer? Were you affected by that?
Actually, I do. That was the early 70s. So it didn't really have a lot of me. I think I was in first grade. And what I do remember is he was going to take a bus of children and he was going to kill them as they were getting off the bus. So my mom would not let me get on the bus because where we lived, I would have to take the bus to school. So every morning before she went to work, and both my parents worked, she would take me to school. Now, I'm sure it wasn't 2 hours before school started, but it seemed like it at 7 years old when you're in first grade. It seemed like I was there 2 hours before school because I would get there before the teachers were there, the doors were open, anything, and I would have to stand there or sit on the bench and wait because she wouldn't let me take the bus because of the Zodiac Killer. And that's what I do remember about the Zodiac, and it still sticks to me to this day. And I know other kids' parents wouldn't let them take the bus either, but they didn't have to come as early as me because their mom didn't work, so they could come like right before school started. But I just remember after standing there every day because of the Zodiac Killer, I couldn't take the bus and I would stand there by myself. It seemed like hours. I'm sure it was 20 minutes, but it seemed like hours.
How was your reaction to that? Like, did you ever argue with your mom?
Oh no. I mean, you would never do that. I mean, there was a reason for it. You know, there was a reason. I mean, she was afraid that I would get killed. I mean, it's not really an argument that you can have, especially at 7. You know, you do it because they're trying to keep you safe. And it wasn't a thought. It's not like today. I mean, today if you left your kid off 2 hours before school, you get in trouble. But it wasn't a big deal then.
Were you affected by like the Cold War, or?
Well, the thing I remember about the Cold War is, again, I was in high school, so you're thinking about other things. I do remember the wall coming down, and that was a big deal. And that was everywhere. Did it affect me? Did it make me stop and think at the time? No, I just thought it was cool. You know, the wall was coming down. I think I was a teenager. But I do remember that. There was concerts. I mean, I don't know if U2 was putting on concerts about it or whatever, or that kind of thing. That's probably, I thought that was cooler, maybe even the wall coming down, but I do remember that.
Were there like any social movements that like you were a part of, or like any that like affected you?
Not particularly. I mean, I would have to say that when I grew up, I can't think of really anybody being passionate about social movements like they are today. After the civil rights movements, I think when you got into the 70s and the 80s, I don't want to say it was hedonistic, but it was almost throwing your cap up in the air. You know, it was kind of a very materialistic time, the 80s even, a very me period. Not so much caring about the other person. It was a lot of very much about yourself. Just a different time. When Reagan was in office, it was a lot of materialistic. That's what I do remember about the 80s.
What was like your favorite part, or like your favorite memory of going to school, like elementary school?
It was probably dressing up for Halloween and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I can remember, and I know this is stupid, but I'd be so excited when Charlie Brown would come on and they'd have the advertisement for Zingers. It was the coolest thing. I mean, when you're second grade, you just can't wait. It's so exciting. But I mean, that's pretty much the excitement.
You don't know what is a zinger.
Oh, you don't know what a zinger is? It's kind of like, it's a cake with frosting on top. They still sell them in the store. It's like a ding dong or a ho ho, but it's kind of like in that family of things. But it's a little cake. They still sell zingers.
Was that your favorite food? Or
I don't know. I'm sure I liked them. I used to. So when I would get breakfast in middle school, it wasn't like today. So breakfast, you could get zingers or ho-hos or ding-dongs or donuts. And that's what you would go when you'd buy breakfast in the morning. That's the 70s.
what was your favorite food during that time?
Well, here's the thing. Growing up in Vacaville, Chinese food was really considered exotic. And the only place you could really go to get Chinese food, we'd have to go to Sacramento. And it was a buffet. There wasn't Chinese food in Vacaville at all. And I can actually remember my mom taking a Chinese cooking class at the community center. But, so that seemed like such a big deal compared to today. That was probably our favorite food.
Do you have any like specific memories connected to that food? Like, did you celebrate by going to Sacramento to like eat the buffet or eat at the buffet?
Usually that was where the shopping was. So a mall didn't open for anyone to shop at in Vacaville or the Fairfield area until I was in high school in the 80s. So if you wanted to go buy school clothes or any of that kind of thing, you had to go to Sacramento. And that's when we would have Chinese food.
Did you watch movies growing up? Like, did you have a favorite movie, or like?
Well, in elementary school, my favorite movie was The Wizard of Oz. But when I was in high school, I had to read To Kill a Mockingbird. And that became not only my favorite book, but my favorite movie of all time. And I've probably read that book 5 times. I even have that movie on DVD. You know, so sometimes things just stick with you. And I would say that as far as not there ever being any social movement, socially, I think it just stuck with me. So I think, and I have my own theory that Atticus Finch is actually a racist, but that's my theory on To Kill a Mockingbird.
What were your hobbies? Did you enjoy reading? Did you enjoy watching movies?
I enjoyed reading a lot. Movies were a big thing because there wasn't a lot to do. I mean, there wasn't a lot to do growing up in Vacaville. So, yeah, I mean, as far as like the high school experience, I did read a lot. I mean, we went to the movie theater. There's one movie theater in town. Showed one movie every week. It's where we lined up to see Star Wars. Yeah. So, I mean, just like you guys, but just on a much smaller scale.
Do you still keep in touch with your friends from high school?
Not a one. So don't think that you will. Times change. And it's like I told my daughter and like I tell my son, you have great friends, wait till you go to college.
What was the one thing in your early childhood that like made you who you are today?
I don't know if it would be my early childhood. But when I was in high school, I took a psychology class. And I remember we didn't have AP classes back then. And before that, I wanted to go into medicine. And that's actually what I was taking the college classes down at the community college for. And I took that class and that changed me. That teacher changed me, and that made me want to be a psychology major. So that's probably the one thing that changed.
So your son said you traveled a lot. Was there like a favorite place that you liked?
Let's see. I mean, I used to go up to Mexico on vacation all the time, but as far as business, probably the most amazing city, and everybody's got a different one. I mean, it's got to be Hong Kong. I mean, Beijing is amazing. China is amazing as a total. And Beijing is amazing, but not as progressive as Hong Kong. So, I mean, you think about San Francisco put 50 San Franciscos together, and that's Hong Kong. That's how big it is. So it's amazing city, amazing food. And I was lucky enough that I got to go there before it went back to Chinese control. So I went there during when it was still part of British control, which just means you can move around a lot more. You go to example now, or you go when I went to Beijing, I will tell you, you go to a communist country and all the problems we have here and all the issues that are occurring today. You go to a country like that and you will want to come back here and kiss the ground because you really don't understand how great you have it. Even you think you don't have freedoms until you go there, until you're walking in Tiananmen Square and they're watching you with machine guns to make sure you don't touch the picture of Mao, you know, and they know that you're an American and they don't like you at all. And I'll tell you a story. When I was in Beijing, there's a lot of Russians that travel there because it's right the country next door. So it's a big tourist area. And the cab driver picked us up and he didn't realize that we were Americans until we started talking in the cab and he kicked us out. And you don't say, I'm not getting out. You're in communist China. You say, okay. And it took us hours to figure out how to get back to the hotel. We ended up walking miles and miles and miles. So it's, you be grateful every day. Even though the issues we have, I'm sure we'll come together. It's nothing like in a communist country.
Have you been to like the smaller parts of, say, China, or like the ones that are less popular?
Yeah, I've been to, well, Shenzhen's right across the border from Hong Kong. But I have been to some smaller places outside of Beijing because when I would travel, even though I studied psychology, I went into retail. And they'd say, we're going to a factory. And you go to the factory and it's two ladies sitting on a porch in front of the house stitching pillow covers when I worked for Pottery Barn. So there were much smaller provinces I went to outside of the larger cities that how they live it makes you grateful for being here. It really does. So when I was, I studied psychology and I ended up getting into retail. And, you know, there's certain things, you know, we were talking about historical events that affect you. And, you know, my generation, probably the one thing everybody says is 9/11. Because we all remember 9/11. We were all sitting there watching the TV and couldn't believe it was happening. But what honestly affected me more than 9/11 was I worked in San Francisco, late 80s, early 90s, for Macy's. I was a buyer. And the AIDS epidemic, though we think about it as the 70s, it was really peaking even more in the 80s. And that was such a devastation to everyone who lived in this area. You would come to work every day and your coworkers had AIDS, and you would have vendors come in and work with you and they had AIDS, and you would watch them get very sick, and people didn't want to touch them, and people were afraid to help them, and a month would pass and 2 months would pass, and then they wouldn't come in anymore because they couldn't get out of bed, and then a couple months later they would be gone. And that would just happen over and over and over again. And you would watch the government let it happen over and over and over again. And you would wait and you would hope, and they would call it a gay disease. And it touched me and everyone who lived in the Bay Area during that time. That probably affected me more than 9/11, more than anything, was seeing your friends, your coworkers get sick and have a hard time getting help. And you want to help them, and they want to be strong, and they don't want you to see them dying. And we all lost a lot of people during that time. And there were a lot of good people. And it was probably, you talk to people who lived during that time here, probably affected you more than anything. And I would say that probably affected me and made me the person I am today more than any world event that has happened. And you think about what changed and what caused the change for people to get involved. And it was a little boy who got a blood transfusion that died. And it's horrific that that happened to him. It's a blessing that it happened to him. So the help would come to everyone else because they wouldn't help anyone because they were gay. And it just makes you want to really look at your fellow mankind and be accepting of them no matter what. That was a big thing to me historically, especially here in the Bay Area. All right, on that happy note.
Okay, aside from that, where did you meet your husband?
Oh, I met him here in the city.
In the city?
Yeah.
How long have you guys been married for?
Over 20 years. Yep. So I got married late. So all you girls out there, get your career, have your good time, and then you worry about a relationship. So I got married in my mid-30s.
Would you recommend getting married?
I don't know, I think it's up to you. I mean, you don't have to. You can if you want. You don't have to. I mean, as a woman today, you can do anything you want.
What is one thing you regret after having kids?
What do I regret? After having kids? I don't know. You know, I didn't have my kids young, so I don't know if I have any regrets. I mean, the only thing I regret is that now you look back and one's gone and one's getting ready to leave. You think you would have done more with them.
How do you feel about your son possibly leaving?
Going away? Can't wait.
Makes me sad.
I'll have so much extra money just for on grocery bills. It'll be time. You hope you do a good job and they go, and you know what? You gotta find yourself. My daughter did it, he'll do it.
How did you feel when your daughter was first moving out?
Oh, I was devastated. It was horrible. But then as time goes by and she has her life and she's doing great and she's, thriving, then it's fine. So I know he'll do fine. I worry about him making a sandwich, but other than that, he'll have to have a good meal plan wherever he goes.
How did having kids change you emotionally and physically?
Well, you don't think about yourself as number one anymore. Everything you do comes second.
Do you miss that feeling?
Of myself not being number one? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I'll make myself number one when he's gone. It's fine.
Is there a message you want to give him in front of the camera?
Oh, a message I want to give them. Whatever you do, make sure it's something that makes you happy. Because the worst thing you can do in life is pick a career that someone's pushing you towards. You have to do what makes you happy, because sometimes money's not everything. If you're unhappy and you hate your life and what you're doing, it just doesn't do anything for you.
Do you have any advice to give to the current high school students?
Follow your heart. Do what makes you happy. Don't be stuck on one thing that you think you have to do to make everybody else happy. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with it. You're the one who has to make a difference. If you want to be a therapist, do it. If you want to go help people in Costa Rica, do it. If you want to study neurology and be a brain surgeon, do it. But you got to do what you're passionate about. Because I can't tell you, when you're 40 or 50 years old and you've been miserable at what you do every day, you're going to look back and you're going to have regret after regret after regret. Do what you have passion for.
How would you recommend finding that passion?
Well, I think you got to go to college. And I think it's okay to pick a major, but I think that you have to leave yourself open to maybe when you get into college, you're going to find things, you're going to study things, you're going to take classes that you never thought about. And some colleges are great that they don't, you declare but not necessarily. So I'll give you an example like Berkeley. You kind of declare, but you have to re-declare after your first year. So you have to fight all over again. Keep that in mind if you go to Berkeley. If you're dead set on something, you got to fight all over again after the first year. But it's okay that if you go and you say, I'm a STEM major, and you find out the first year in, I hate this, I want to go into journalism, that's okay. Because if that's what you're passionate about, that's what you should do. Don't do it because you think it makes everybody else happy. Because everybody else won't be around when you're 50 and 60 years old. Okay, remember that. You gotta do what makes you happy.
Going back to traveling, was there like a least favorite place, or was it?
The least favorite place. The least favorite place. God, I can't think of a least favorite place. Well, I mean, I didn't really like going back and visiting my grandparents in Pennsylvania. I mean, I didn't really like it back there. I mean, even when I was a kid, all I ever wanted to do was go live in San Francisco. So, I mean, it was okay to go back there, but I wasn't really high on going back to the East Coast, so I don't know.
What part of San Francisco attracted you as a kid?
Well, when I was growing up as a kid in the 70s, my mom was kind of like a hippie-ish a little bit. So it was kind of like going to Berkeley. I loved Berkeley. It was just all that kind of, that movement going on. It was kind of probably the social things going on. Even though we weren't in the 80s or during that time, or I was too young to really be socially active or all that, it was so much always going on around the Bay Area. And so much of the protesting and the hippie movement and, you know, all that kind of thing going on. I don't know. I just always wanted, I always felt like I should have been born earlier. But I'm glad it is what it is.
What are some interesting stories about your life that you haven't mentioned thus far that you would like to talk about?
Oh, geez. I talked about so much. I mean, well, what I didn't talk about was my time that I lived in LA. So I did have to move down to LA for my job. I was working at Macy's, and we bought this department store chain down there, and they wanted somebody to buy the higher end goods for home down there. So I would buy like crystal tables that were $60,000, or, you know, all this crystal or dinnerware, this kind of things that were thousands and thousands of dollars because of the clientele down there. And I would have events. I would have, designers come in to sign goods, a Martha Stewart event, that kind of thing. So though I hated to go down there. I mean, I thought of going down to LA, and LA is so different from here. It's like a different country. I kind of found a niche, and because I did all these events, and I bought this product that wealthy people were interested in, celebrities were interested in, celebrities who wanted things signed by these designers, I found myself getting invited to a lot of things. So I never had a problem getting a dinner reservation because I ended up knowing somebody who could get me into Wolfgang Puck's restaurant. I did a lot of things. I was very good friends with the special events department in LA. So I would go to the People's Choice Awards every year. You know, all these award shows, sit with the celebrities, go to the dinner afterwards. I go to the after parties. Trying to think of one. I can remember one event that my girlfriend did before Jimmy Kimmel was anyone, and he did a morning show, a little blip on K-Rock in the morning. So we had him come in to MC something at the Beverly Center store, and the only reason I remember it was I could care less about him. I mean, he was on the radio, whatever. He was like a nothing celebrity. There's a lot of those in LA. But she had such a crush on him. So I do remember that. I mean, so there were some good times. I mean, not everybody could say they always got invited to award shows and the after parties and the dinners and all the celebrity stuff, and I feel lucky that I got to experience that. It was a fun thing, but it almost wasn't reality. So I was, after about 4 or 5 years, I was ready to come back to San Francisco and leave that behind. Very kind of superficial down there. But it was fun.
Were there any like celebrities that you were excited to work with?
Well, I was excited to work with Martha Stewart, but she was not nice. She was difficult. I'm trying to think what other celebrities. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel was such an unknown. He would do anything. And I mean, most of the celebrities I saw were either at award shows or at the dinners, at the after parties. I mean, I'm trying to think of some that I saw. You know who Pierce Brosnan is? He was James Bond. I mean, you got to realize this is the 90s. I don't know if you guys are James Bond fans. Drew Carey, who does The Price is Right now, he was at a lot of them. I'm trying to think who else was. I mean, a lot. Oh, Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Mel Gibson. I sat next to him one time. Demi Moore, Sean Penn. There's a lot of them. But, you know, the thing is that you don't really talk to them. I mean, I don't go up and ask for their autograph. I'm at that's their party. You know, it's not like I see them on the street on Sunset Boulevard. It'd be really inappropriate to go up and like say, "Oh my God, Sean Penn," you know, and he'd probably punch me anyways. But you know, you just try to play cool and like, "Oh, I'm sitting next to Mel Gibson," and you just like smile and you just chit chat a little bit, but you try to play it cool.
Was your life back then similar to like what we saw in the movies in like the 70s, 80s, or 90s?
I would say that as far as high school in the 80s, there were some movies that were snippets of little things of the 80s, but to me, the one movie of exactly what it was like being a teenager in the 80s is Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That's exactly. Every school had a Spicoli. Every school had a guy who was selling tickets to concerts like that. That's exactly how high school was. If you watch that movie, that's how high school was in the 80s. I absolutely, 100%.
I assume you went to college, right?
Yep,
What did you major in?
psychology.
Okay.
But I became a buyer. I didn't do it. I got sucked into Macy's.
Well, like, what changed? Like, why did you move to retail?
Well, I got a job while I was in college at Macy's to help support myself. And at this time, this is the early to mid 80s now. At that time, that industry was really high on getting women into executive positions because it was mostly a male-dominated industry. So they made it really easy for me to get promoted, to go into the executive program. And so this is what I want you to be careful with. It's real easy to get sucked into something that you think you can make a lot of money, you're getting promoted fast. Don't lose your passion. I still wish to this day I would have focused and still stayed in psychology because I got accepted to this program at a college, a research program, and I turned it down to stay at Macy's. And it's fine. I worked my way up. I became a buyer. I traveled the world. It was great, but it still wasn't what my number one passion was. But you can easily get sucked into something, so don't lose your focus. But would I change anything? No, because I wouldn't end up where I am today. But that's why. You just kind of get like, wow, I'm moving fast. And that's why.
How would you recommend, like, what should you do if you're getting sucked in, but you want to, like, stay in a focus?
Well, you got to take chances, get out of your comfort zone. It was just really comfortable.
What was your coming to age experience of from transitioning into like a teenager into an adult?
I don't know. I think college just does that.
Was there any specific event in college, or was it just like the people you
No.
surround yourself with, the environment?
You just grow. You just do.
Were you excited to go to college?
I don't know. Yes and no.
Why not?
I don't know. It was just a continuation of school. There was never a lot of. I mean, what you guys go through is crazy. Like, you're so driven about, these are the schools. This is where I'm going to apply. This is going to be my major. This is where I have to go. It's never like that when I applied to school. It was like, I think I'll just apply to Davis. It's next door, and that's where I'll go. It never had anything to do with, I have to go to this school. I mean, I never, nor my friends, nor anybody I went to high school with was never like, I have to do this because I have to go to Harvard. I have to do this because I want to go to UCLA. The majority was, I think I'll just go to Sac State, or I'll go to Davis, and it's here, and it's cool, and I'll go to school, or I'll go to Chico. I mean, the big thing when I was in school is everybody wanted to go to Chico because it was the #1 party school in the country. So everybody wanted to go to Chico. Never had anything to do with, like, academics. So the feeling was, and maybe it was just because where I grew up, it was just a continuation.
Did you do any partying?
Well, who didn't? Of course. But we'll just leave it at that. It was the 80s. It was the late 70s, early 80s. It was a different time. And I know every parent says that.
What kind of influence did your parents have growing up?
The #1 was academics. I mean, I was a good student. I graduated high school with honors. You know, that was the big thing. So probably academically, and just work ethic. I mean, I had a job when I was 14.
What job?
I went and cut fruit up in Winters, which you could do without a work permit or anything. So I would go up there probably more to smoke cigarettes than cut fruit. But I wouldn't go up there, and you get paid by the box. So every time you finish slicing the apricots and putting them on the tray to dry, you put the box up, you get 45 cents a box. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but gas was only 50 cents a gallon, so, or 60 cents a gallon, so, in high school, so it was enough.
Are you still in contact with people from college?
No, not really. You just grow, and probably the only people I'm in contact with are the people from the last place I worked. And that would be it. I mean, we've all gone our separate ways, all over the country, all over the world. Everybody's somewhere else, and you just move on.
How did the people that you surrounded yourself with affect you growing up?
You're talking about friends
Yeah.
or schoolmates? Just schoolmates in
Friends,
general.
schoolmates, teachers.
Well, I had a couple teachers that made me pretty passionate about some things. They were pretty good. There was very much a hardline definition of people when I went to high school with groups of people. It's kind of like when you look at 80s movies, and there's certain those groups, they really did exist. There was no overlap. I mean, the cheerleaders only hung out with the cheerleaders, and the jocks, and these people, and it was really that. And I saw a lot of people get into drugs, heavy drugs. There's a lot of heavy drugs in the late 80s or the early 80s, late 70s, that probably, that would be the thing that would turn you off. You would see what it did to them.
Did you have any like close friends that fell to drugs?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Did you try to like persuade them out of it?
I did, and I had my best friend in high school, and I had her even move into my apartment, and she was too far down the rabbit hole. I couldn't help her. At some point, you have to walk away. You gotta worry about yourself.
When you were growing up, was it like during the time where, I guess it would be, but like where modern technology started happening? Like, did that change?
Yeah, so when I was a senior in high school, I was able to take, I don't know if it was a college class, but it was a class you could take for more credit, which I didn't need. So I went to school at 7 o'clock in the morning, hence I needed a car, because I lived so far away from high school. And it was how to write BASIC, which was the very first computer language. So I did it with a girlfriend. We went there, and I hated it. That was probably the first thing of computers, very first thing. So this was 83. And she loved it. She went on to get a big deal job eventually at Hewlett Packard. But that was the first touch of any kind of technology as far as computers go. Until I probably got a job at Macy's and they started to put computers in. So this must have been around the earthquake. And we got to put Lotus, which was prior to Excel, which was a green screen. So instead of using a calculator, we could do things on the computer. And this was all you had to do, all this, you have to self-taught yourself. You have to self-teach. There's no classes or anything. And that was probably, so then that was later, that was in my early 20s. That was the first kind of thing of technology. Otherwise, we used to do spreadsheets like this. I remember we had a spreadsheet where we would like do our plans for the budget, and we'd actually put them on the floor. They were huge. So we could get all our numbers in it out for the year. So we could plan our budget for our department. A lot of pencil and eraser.
Did you enjoy the transition?
Yeah, I actually did really well with it. So yeah, it made it easier.
Was the technology like expensive?
I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, it just, when you work for a big company, it's just natural transition that they have to start putting this kind of stuff in.
You mentioned an earthquake during that time period. Can you explain more about that?
Well, that was the Loma Prieta earthquake. So yeah, the bridge fell down. The marina caught on fire. It was a big deal. We were watching the baseball game, A's and Giants, and there it went, the earthquake. The one thing I learned, if you live in San Francisco, or you live in LA, or you live in California, don't ever let your car get below a quarter of a tank. Because if an earthquake hits, you will not be able to get gas. So always keep a little cash in your wallet, always keep that aside, and always have a quarter tank of gas. Don't get below because you won't be able to get it and you won't be able to get to where you need to go. But yeah, I remember it was rough. It was rough.
Did you have like a favorite like sports that you like watched?
Oh yeah, my family watched football. We were big football fans. And we went to A's games. I went to A's games since I was 6 or 7 years old. So I wouldn't say we were diehard, but we did. We watched sports. But not
Did sports affect you, like growing up? Was it something you
Well, I'll
talked
tell
about
you a
with friends?
story. So, my dad and I used to watch football religiously every weekend. And when he was in charge, when he was the boss out at Travis, the GIs that work for him and everything, they do a pool where you'd have to pick, for the football every week. And I won so many times that they asked my dad that I not play anymore. But I don't watch that much anymore.
Has there been any like big change in your recent adult life?
Probably the biggest change was 9 years ago. I was diagnosed with diabetes and Graves' disease. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I have a very different type of diabetes because I was extremely underweight. So my diabetes acts as if you have juvenile diabetes, even though you get it late in life. And I had that on top of Graves' disease, which is a thyroid disease. I thought I was going to die.
Did it change your like daily routine?
For sure, to this day. I look at kids that are diagnosed diabetic when they're little, and I think how hard it is for them. Though maybe it gets easier for them as an adult because they don't know any difference. It's how they live. But, I think the one thing that I see is when I see people counting calories, or they say I'm going to go on a low-carb diet, and I'm going to count my carbs, it just bothers me because I have to count every single carb I eat. I have to calculate it to kind of figure out how much insulin I need to take. And I look at people that just eat something. You don't even think about it. You grab an apple, you don't even think about it. Everything I grab, I have to think about it. You get used to it over time, but always in the back of your mind is, are my blood sugars too high? Are my blood sugars too low? Are they just right so I can drive a car? I don't want to have to pass out. I've passed out a couple times. You don't want to go too high. You're looking for a bathroom all the time because you have to go to the bathroom a lot because you're trying to get the glucose out of your body. It's certain things, and maybe it just affects you more and it bothers you more because it happens when you're older. But yeah, it's life-changing. There's things that, I can do whatever I want, but I can't, we always talked about we're gonna go do this hiking trip, my husband and I, when we went back to the Himalayas. And I really can't do it now. So it's not that I can't do everything, I do just about everything. That's pretty extreme. But there are some things, and I have to go to the doctor twice a year. I have to have my thyroid checked all the time because it's in remission right now. So that was life-changing. And eventually I had to leave my job because my job was very stressful and there was a lot of travel, there was a lot of hours. I probably worked 60 to 80 hours a week with a family. And it was making just my condition worse. So I left my job early. So that was life-changing.
Is there one thing you miss doing that you used to be able to do?
The one thing, I just miss not worrying about what I eat. Don't ever go on a diet, girls. Be healthy. Don't worry about what you eat. It's just not worth it. Just live life. I try, you go through times. You go through I don't even care I'm diabetic. I'm not going to look at those numbers anymore. I don't care. And it is what it is. But you can overcome anything as long as you put your mind to it. And one of the reasons that I didn't end up in the hospital is I was a runner. And I used to run 8 to 10 miles every morning before I went to work in the morning. And the only reason I didn't end up in the hospital was because I would run and it would drive those blood sugars down to a level where I wouldn't want to pass out because my blood sugars were around 600, which is coma. So the moral to this is exercise, eat healthy, be healthy, and whatever life throws at you, you can deal with it, because I dealt with it. And I still raised 2 kids even though I was really sick. And you can do whatever you want. All of you can do whatever you want. So no matter what life throws at you, you just gotta pull up your big girl pants and go forward.
I think we are good on time. We would like to thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Everybody
Okay.
say thank you to my mom.
Was it good?
Yeah.
Was it? Okay.
Do you all